All right, so we've all seen it. Those listings, whether you go to Reverb or eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, wherever you look, you're going to find this listing, and that is for the fully upgraded Squier guitar that has been sitting there for months on end, sometimes even longer. And I hate to just come out and say it flat, but nobody wants to buy your upgraded Squier. Now, I feel bad when I see these listings because clearly someone has gone through the trouble, whether doing it themselves or paying for someone else to professionally do these. A lot of common upgrades that you will see is specifically with your classic vibe or vintage modified offset guitars like your Jazzmaster and your Jaguar and your Mustang. You will just see these guitars that have an insane amount of money put into them. And yet, because of the listing prices, which if you stop to consider the cost of all of those parts, you basically, at the end of the day, are getting a guitar for free. And for whatever reason, the overall sentiment that I see from folks is that when you take a look at the price tag, despite a Squier classic vibe having over $1,000 worth of parts in it, I'd say 9.9 times out of 10, someone is going to choose the Vintera offset or the Fender Japan guitar over the updated Squier. Now, why is this? It's 2025 now. I have seen the fandom behind Squier grow an incredible amount over the past 10 years. I myself, as someone who builds custom guitars and upgrades guitars for other people, commonly use Squier as my go-to modding platform because the barrier to entry in upgrading a Squier is very, very low, right? All of the hard parts of building a parts caster, if you were to buy a finished aftermarket body from MJT or Bloom Doom or Guitar Mill or Tone Bomb or any one of the fantastic options there are out there for bodies and necks, the barrier to entry on those is quite a bit higher for the average person because they don't have either the know-how or the tools, or they're afraid to get in there, put in the hours or maybe days required to measure out where the mounting holes for a vibrato go, or scared to mess up the neck mounting holes. All of those things are very valid. And if someone is curious enough, of course, they're going to make that jump. Now, for most folks, it isn't really about the sale of those guitars that they put together. They're trying to put together something custom, something special, something exactly to the spec and colors that they want, and are willing to go on the hero's journey of putting one together for themselves. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have those folks who are a lot more risk averse, but do still want a custom guitar. And that's where Squier provides a really, really nice platform for which to begin to, a lot of times, incrementally upgrade a guitar. And the advantage to this is that you can have a guitar from day one with a bit of a setup and a little bit of extra attention to detail those Squier classic vibes and vintage modifieds are fantastic guitars, especially for the money. And so you start off typically by upgrading the pickups, upgrade the bridge, upgrade the vibrato, upgrade the tuners, right? Upgrade the wiring harness. A lot of these have those 920D, very clean looking wiring harnesses. And what you have is a fantastic premium spec overall guitar, with the exception of the body and neck. Now, why do people not see the value in these things? If these are mods that you are going to be doing anyway, and you start to do the math, a classic vibe Jaguar or Jazzmaster starts off close to the $400 to $500 mark, right? A good set of pickups from there, if we just go mid-tier, like your pure vintage 65 Jazzmaster or Jaguar pickups, that's going to run you probably around $175 or so after taxes, right? So now you are at close to $600 already with that. And you've just upgraded the pickups. Throw in another 100 for the vibrato. And now you are at right around $700 to $800. Upgrade the bridge depending on what it is that you put in it. A lot of these modded and upgraded Squiers that I see will come with top tier hardware, like a mastery bridge and a mastery vibrato. And that's easily $450, close to $500 worth of kit once taxes and shipping are considered. And so it's funny to me to see folks listing their upgraded Squiers with $1,000 plus worth of upgraded hardware and electronics, and listing them at fairly reasonable prices, all things considered. $700, $800, some $900 and $1,000, and no one wants to touch them. There's a couple listings that I've seen that have been up for 5-6 months, and no one's touching them. And I think it is because of the value proposition here, right? Unfortunately, I feel like there is a sentiment among the guitar community, one that is continuously upheld by folks with the loudest voices in the front, and that is that mods add no value to a guitar. And I find that to be absolutely hilarious. I'm not sure on what planet that is and when this idea first began, but I got into it with some folks recently on a forum, and we were talking about vintage guitars, and there was someone with a vintage Jaguar who was selling the whole thing for $3,000. It was a 1964 refinish, but all of the parts had been gutted out. And there were some folks that were coming out on this forum that were basically telling me that that was way too much money, that they would never pay even close to that amount. And if they're being generous on a good day, that they would offer up only $1,500, maybe max $2,000 for that thing, despite the fact that it had premium parts, premium new parts, pickups, bridge, tremolo, all of the stuff to build this entire guitar. And yet the only thing that these folks were giving value to was the original neck and body. And that didn't sit right with me, in the same way that folks who are selling these upgraded Squiers, unfortunately, are left to toil for months on end, unable to make their sales. Now, there's a common thread here, I feel like, with when I see these kinds of guitars. And one of the big ones is that regardless of the amount of upgrades that you put into a guitar, if it still has its original neck, then folks are never going to consider it. I've seen folks bolt on a genuine Fender neck, and now all of a sudden, the value proposition of that guitar has increased significantly because now you've got a Japanese Fender neck or an American vintage reissue Fender neck, one that has significant value even on its own. That leaves the buyer with only one final piece to potentially replace, and that is the body, which, again, not very hard to commission one of these custom body makers to make one in your favorite color, so long as this guitar, this upgraded Squier that you're buying, maybe has a plain headstock or something. But that is one case where I've seen these upgraded Squiers sell. Another instance that I've seen folks not hesitate to buy an upgraded Squier is when a well-known personality or company or figure is the one that is putting that upgraded Squier together. A good example of this is Black Bobbin. They are a fantastic guitar company, very well loved. And a few years ago, they started to offer these upgraded Squiers, essentially. And for the amount of kit that was in this upgraded Squier, Black Bobbin was asking a very low price for it. These had the 920D wiring harness. They had the Black Bobbin signature Lawler pickups. These had mastery bridges and vibratos. I believe they had upgraded tuners and an upgraded neck plate. Easily over $1,000 worth of hardware and components put into this. And you add to that Black Bobbin, this celebrated and respected guitar company, was the one doing these mods. And now all of a sudden, it's not hard to sell an upgraded Squier for anywhere between $1,300. Some folks that I've seen asking for them used $1,500 plus. And so the value proposition becomes greater at that point because now you've got a verified name behind it. This isn't just Joe Schmo in his garage cobbling parts that he bought off of Reverb to put together an upgraded Squier. This is someone who knows what they're doing, and people trust, people know, based on history and reputation, that they are going to end up with a fantastic instrument for the money, especially considering that Fender themselves, as time goes on, continues to raise the prices of even what used to be their mid-tier guitars. The mid-tier is starting to disappear, really, beyond just the Vintera series, which have specs that maybe some folks aren't into. The Vintera 2 Jaguar, for example, the black binding and black block inlays on a maple neck on a Jag, it's a very polarizing aesthetic. And so for folks that want something else, there's nothing in that mid-tier for them in the Jaguar department, right? So unless you yourself have a sizable following and a reputation, you don't have to be a YouTuber, you don't have to be an Instagram influencer. Maybe you've just been hanging around on offsetguitars.com or the gear page for long enough that people trust you and people have seen the work that you've done. Then yeah, if you build something for yourself and it turns out fantastic, and someday in the future you want to get rid of that thing, you're probably not going to have too hard of a time getting rid of it. However, if you are someone that does not have that kind of reputation or history, and you're not verified by folks, and you maybe are just getting started with your journey, but you still put in $1,000+ worth of kit into your Squier, I think my best advice for you is most likely to just part out the guitar. You are not only going to be losing a significant amount of money at the price that most people will finally bite on these. And the sold prices that I've seen on some of these insanely upgraded Squiers is around like the $500-$600 range. That's only about $100-$200 more than what a stock Squier classic vibe or vintage modified Jazzmaster or Jaguar go for. And so while it's tempting to sell these stock parts for the meager amounts of money that you will get from them in hopes of recouping all of the money that you're putting into the upgrades, I'd say hold on to them. Put them away in the drawer, right? Because maybe one day you are going to end up buying that American or Japanese or Mexican offset that you've always wanted. And maybe you don't want to keep the Squier as a backup anymore. And you just want to make back some of the money if you are not going to move those upgraded parts to your new guitar. The parts themselves will very regularly sell. For example, if you have a stay trem bridge, despite the fact that a stock stay trem bridge, once you're finally able to get your hands on one, is usually less than $100 after the conversion from British pounds. People are commonly selling those bridges for $200 because there is a long wait time for those stay trem bridges. Same for the stay trem collet and arm. These are the kinds of parts that I see all the time on these upgraded Squiers that are then being sold off for next to nothing compared to what folks have put into them. But yeah, the parts, these offset parts, the custom made hand wound pickups, the premium wiring harnesses, all of this stuff sells. You will end up making back a decent amount of your money as compared to trying to sell a fully built, upgraded Squier guitar. And your chances of selling those things even quicker grows, especially if you are a part of these private guitar community forums, because people are wheeling and dealing parts and guitars and amps and pedals and things on these platforms all day, every day. Usually folks vet one another most of the time. Most of the folks that are doing deals, the gear page, for example, folks get ratings just like they do when you sell on Reverb or eBay. So using platforms like that is an easy way to also minimize the amount of fees that a platform like Reverb or eBay will take from you. And so, yeah, again, you end up making more of your money back. The value proposition for folks just doesn't seem very attractive. They think to themselves that if they ever need to resell this guitar, that they are going to have an incredibly hard time doing so, namely because of the logo on the headstock. And that's unfortunate because we know now, right, through the legions of fans, through the multitude of videos like here on YouTube that claim that Squier is even better than Fender now, despite all of that, the bias against it being a Squier is still there once you start to ask for more money. And that's just facts, right? Squiers are attractive to folks because they are cheap. And once you start to move into the $700 and $800 plus range for a Squier because it's upgraded, then that value proposition goes right out the window. I think the big thing to ask yourself here is If you were putting something on the market, think back, put yourself in the consumer's shoes. If you had a choice between an upgraded Squier and a stock brand new Fender Japan Jazzmaster or Jaguar, right? And they are within a stone's throw of each other in price, which one would you choose and why? Ask yourself that question for a second, because I think that's what helps you get into the psyche of your potential buyers. Its origins as a budget guitar will always overshadow your fully upgraded instrument. So unless you are somebody that's famous, or unless you have put in the extra money to upgrade the neck to something very desirable, then unfortunately you're going to want to part that guitar back out and sell the components individually, because that is your best chance of recouping the most money back. Well, I think that about does it for this video. I hope it was informative, especially if you've been having a hard time selling your fully upgraded Squier. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars selling tips.